Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Coffee and Clarks. I'm your co-host Javian,
And I'm your other co-host, Tyler.
and we have a very special guest with us today. He's a good friend of mine. I've gotten an opportunity to play with him on a few separate occasions, and he's always a great hang and a great person to talk about coffee, which is what we're going to talk about a little later today. So as you can tell, we have Dr. Courtney Jones with us today. And Dr. Courtney Jones, he currently serves as assistant professor at Florida Atlantic University and artistic director of the FAU Jazz Ensemble. He's a UCLA graduate. He has a solo CD project called Between Two Worlds, and he's played all across the country in various groups such as the Gateways Collective, which is a all-Black brass quintet, the Gateways Music Festival, which I've gotten an opportunity to play with him in, and the list goes on and on and on. So I want to personally thank Dr. Courtney Jones for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Awesome. So we have a lot of things to talk about today, about your career, about your teaching approaches. But before we get into that, we got to know, and I can already know a little bit about this. Tell us about, are you a coffee drinker? Do you drink coffee? What's your preference?
Am I a coffee drinker? Well, since this is, talking about music and coffee, I think we should, well, not we, I'm just going to show you. You guys mind coming with me? Is that okay?
Yeah, go. Take us on the journey.
Great.
Wow. You got a whole setup here.
Well, here's my thing, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are here, I enjoy coffee, okay? I have Cuban, and I've been drinking coffee ever since I was little, right? My grandmother used to give me coffee and all that other stuff, right? Maybe one of the reasons why I'm OCD right now, but you just say it's longevity and all that other stuff. So anyway, I love coffee, okay? And when you talk about coffee, there's only one choice of coffee that I enjoy. And that choice, my friends, is Cafe Bustelo, okay?
Oh, okay.
I love Cafe Bustelo. I like the whole beans and grind it myself. But I enjoy that mainly because I love the taste. And let me show you how I make my coffee.
Okay.
So I have my DeLonghi espresso machine. Take 2 scoops, pat it down. Well, actually, 1.5. Pat it down. Then put my coffee back in the refrigerator because I'm just weird like that. Okay. Then I take it 2 times, 3 times a lady, right? And then I go ahead and place it into my machine. Now, before I begin, I like to come up, normally if I've had coffee, which I've had before, I like to make sure that I decaminate my coffee by a little bit of steam. Mainly because I like to make sure my coffee tastes the same, as fresh as it can be. Normally, you're probably wondering, well, don't you like a frothing thing? Don't you normally do that with milk? Well, I'm lactose intolerant, and I don't, okay? And plus, I realized that, well, it cleans it out, and the coffee cup is really good. Well, my espresso is good. But in this case, since I'm really not playing, I'm actually going to make a café cubano, okay? Con azúcar. For those of you who are non-Spanish speakers, azúcar, sugar, con with. Con azúcar, café cubano, okay? Cuban coffee, all right? Then I normally will, sometimes you'll put the sugar inside of the thing. I'm not going to do that. That's how you mess up your machines. So I take a little bit of sugar from the secret sugar stash, okay? The secret sugar stash. Nope, that's not good sugar. Let me get this other sugar. Secret sugar stash. Yeah, okay, that's good enough. Okay. Okay. Secret sugar stash. And then, before we do this, place it inside.
Okay.
Okay. I don't like it too sweet, but I want it just a little bit of sweetness because I don't really do sugar except for once a week. And because this is such a special day, I'll do it for you guys.
We appreciate that.
Hey, I appreciate you. Okay. We go in, turn it on, and voila. And at this moment, as my coffee is being produced in the espresso, I think about all the mistakes I've done in my life and how coffee helps rectify each one of those mistakes.
Hey. How long is your pour?
Well, I know I'm going to be up until about 10 o'clock tonight. So I make sure I do about 2.5, 3.5 for this espresso. Then we let it drip just a little bit because you got to have the agua. Again, agua means water.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just a little bit. I take a wooden coffee stirrer, and I don't take a plastic coffee stirrer. I normally use these for my students when we're talking about breathing and blowing through. And plus, it's already hot liquid. I don't want to decontaminate that with the plastic stirrer. Then take it out, do a little like this, just enough. Happy birthday, Mary had a little lamb.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you want to do, just to get all the sugar dissolved. Then, so when you when you taste the espresso, you can actually enjoy it. And if you notice, you really can't see it, but you might be able to, without spilling it, a little bit of that froth up there.
Yeah.
This is what I really enjoy about the coffee because it's not just shooting the espresso, but it's making sure that you can taste exactly what you're making, and that is definitely hot.
Well, this is certainly a first on the show. We actually get to see the coffee making process. So
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Dr. Jones's coffee making process.
There it is.
There it is. Awesome. Yeah. So Tyler, what are you drinking today?
So not espresso, actually. I did a Chemex right before we got on. A new bag of beans from Swings, which is a place that has multiple areas in like the DC area. This one's from Guatemala. It's not too bad. I always kind of, my go-to is like the light to medium roast. This one's from a single origin, so it's not too bad. Yeah, I like it. Usually I just do like 1 to like maybe 2 cups a day. I try not to push it to any more than that. Just because I'll hit a crash.
Right.
So yeah, I try to instead drink more water.
Yeah.
Or, like go outside, sunlight, things of that nature. But yeah, that's what I'm onto right now. So it's working.
Fair enough. Well, I too have been doing a little more espresso lately. I just got an espresso machine for my office. You can probably see it over here, right here.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I use it for my basically that after lunch lull that you kind of hit once the food gets up in you, as they call it, the itis. So I've been starting to do a little bit of espresso in the afternoon to get me through the rest of the day. And I've been what I did earlier before we started today. I was in Birmingham a few weeks ago, and anytime I go to a new city, I always try to find the local beans. So I found this little local coffee shop called June Coffee, and they roast their own, and it's right here. And this is their El Salvador single origin. And this is I brought 2 bags. This one's for my espresso, and I brought another one that I do at home for my pour over. So this has been probably one of my favorite bags of coffees ever.
Wow.
Which is obviously high praise, but it's quite amazing. And it could be the espresso machine too, but even when I do the pour over at home, it's like, okay, this is really good.
Wait a minute, hold on. You do pour overs?
I know, Courtney, we've had this whole debate. You're a French press guy.
Basura!
Yeah,
Basura!
so my first conversation with Dr. Jones about coffee, I remember it very vividly. And I was like, oh yeah, I do pour. He said, you do pour overs. You got to do the French press. And we went to the Ethiopian restaurant, and I guess that was at Rochester, somewhere in Rochester, to get some coffee there. That was a good time. That was a very good time.
That was a great time.
Yeah, that was a very good time. So now that we've talked about, our coffee choices, we have a few questions for you about trumpet and your career. So obviously you're a well-established trumpet professor, doing a lot of wonderful things. I was curious, how did you get started in music, and when did you know this was something you want to pursue?
Right. Well, I mean, I guess, I was surrounded by music my entire life. My parents bought a piano for my brothers and sisters, and they took lessons and whatnot, and it just sat in the house until I was born. And then I, started banging on the piano, and then started realizing, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. And those old piano books where they had the fingerings and the hands and where the thumb goes and all that other stuff. So I took that and I actually taught myself how to play. And then I began learning by rote. Listening to what was on the radio. My first song that I remember learning was the Sesame Street song, which is a major third. Ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. Major triad. And so it was really simple. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is how it works. And I kind of played the simple medleys and whatnot. And all through, elementary, and you really don't really start looking at instruments until what, sixth grade or something. And I was like, well, I'm gonna go play violin. And then instead of playing the violin, when we show up to the music shop, you want to call it divine intervention or just a sixth grader who sees something shiny. It's like, I want to play that instrument. As we walked in the middle of the room where the sun hit was this trumpet, and it was a blessing trumpet out of all trumpets. I kid you not. And I was like, well, I want to play this horn now because it's shiny. And I was like, well, we have the violin. My mom was like, look, the boy wants to play whatever this thing called, let him play it. So that's how I played the trumpet. So piano was my primary instrument, and then trumpet became my primary, then secondary. It's now piano, it's now my secondary instrument, but I still play. I play the Bach prelude every morning, either if I'm in my office or even in my place, just to there's something very spiritual for me about beginning the day with sound, but beautiful sound and calming sound. And Bach is someone that and also Philip Glass, we can talk about that later. But Bach and how he produces just the arpeggiation of chordal sequences is really beautiful for me. And so I start my day every day with that before I pick up the trumpet. That's how I kind of got into it.
Nice. And then at what point did you, start getting serious about it, or was it always kind of a thing that you were super passionate about? I mean, when did you say like, hey, I want to like continue this, I want to see how far I can take this?
Right. I never really got serious until maybe college, right? Because you go into the all states, well, all districts, all counties, then all states, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, everybody should be able to do this, right? Not really thinking on me that as you get older, you realize that you're far and few between, right? But it wasn't until college, right, when because my minor is in business marketing management, where my teacher really sat me down and says, all right, well, what do you really want to do? I mean, you able to do this, you could do this for a career, but like career, because I wanted to be a high school band director, which I was. And then but then I was like, well, let me see how far we can go. And then you get bit by the serious bug of performance, especially with NTC, and local Rotary competitions and things of that nature where you win. It's just like, oh, what else can you do, right? And then when you realize that instead of working part-time job at a retail store, nothing wrong with that, or food industry, that what you make on a Sunday, you get what you make that one Sunday is a month's paycheck, right?
Mhm.
And you're playing your instrument. And then you begin the seriousness about what is it that you really want to do, you know?
Mhm.
And so that's when I became serious. When I was like, all right, I can do what? Just play half notes and whole notes and transpose and make what? Sign me up. I'm all about it.
Nice. So you kind of touched on it a little bit, but who are some of your life and or musical mentors growing up? And we say life too because obviously there are people that can impact you who may not have any knowledge of music. So we always like to throw that in there. But who are some of those people that have impacted your life?
Well, my first, I mean, I believe that so many people have many mentors, whether they are direct or indirect, right? And the first person that really got me like focused was my second grade teacher. Her name was Marguerite Bussey. I say was because she passed a couple years ago. And coming from New York down to Georgia, I was just very rambunctious. A lot of people in the South are a little more laid back. We're in New York. This is what it is. You know what I mean? And this teacher calmed me down. She was very loving. She was a phenomenal educator, and she was a singer. And the first thing that I heard her saying was a teacher talent show. This is when teachers used to do talent shows, right, for their kids. And she sang "My Funny Valentine." And
Mhm.
once she sang that, I was in love. I was just in love with this woman. And so she was mainly my first one. Later on, when I got into playing, my sixth grade teacher, Gavin Anderson, he comes from a family like musical royalty, and where I was in Georgia, and his dad Larue was famous clarinet player who taught everybody really, and he was a product of his father, and he taught me how to like love the instrument. Right, I actually switched to trombone because of him. He was a trombone player, and then I switched back to trumpet. But he was very calm, very kind. Right. Fast forward, my eighth grade teacher, Robert Lee, trumpet player, and he really got me into transcribing because when he sat down and he was like, "Oh, how does that?" I was like, remember that song back in the '90s, "My Boo." And
Yeah.
he was like, "Well, what song you guys like?" He was like, "Oh, how does it go? Dun dun, but dun dun." And he wrote it out, and then I like just played it on piano, and I'm like, show me how to do this. So he also taught me how to like listen intently, actively listen, right? Not knowing that I was actively listening, but how to sit down and write and transcribe. Then going into my high school, we had Mark Ruppelt, who was my first trumpet teacher who gave me lessons. Um, who was no longer living. He was a part of the Air Force band, tall behemoth of a guy, and he was really, really cool, but very direct and military because I come from military families, so he knew exactly how to get to these points. And it's like, look, this is what I need you to do, X, Y, and Z. Bam, no BS. This is what it was. And then my high school teacher, Laura Fry, who is now Laura Estes, this short woman playing saxophone, just very beautiful, very calm, just just yeah, welcome everybody, blah blah boom. As soon as she sat on that podium, it was like General Grievous, like what it is. And this woman she showcased passion, right? She showcased, how to be excellent at your craft, right? While working collectively together, and I'm really thankful for her because we still keep in contact, you know. Um, and then when you get to college, you have your obviously applied teachers. We had, one of my ensemble directors, Robert Rumelo, who, in my opinion, is the salt of the earth when it comes to conducting. And he taught us how to be early, you're on time, you're on time, you're late, you've failed, or you missed your opportunity. And he taught us how to come prepared to rehearsals, right? So you're not coming to rehearsal to, look over your parts, but you're coming to rehearsal to make music and to do it from a place of love and empathy and at the highest level. And also, he was a trumpet player who also played jazz, and already composed, written, authored, and all that stuff. But he just showcased a level of empathy, of love that we saw. And under that same breath, there was Lisa Oberlander, clarinet teacher, who we had interactions, but watching her perform in front of her students, I was like, I need to feel this. I need you to teach me how to this. And she was like all serious. To this day, she still is. And I still respect her. My stage presence, started with her because she taught me that. I remember I was playing Flight of the Bumblebee because I heard her play it and I was like, I gotta learn this piece. It's so cool. I remember she walked past my practicing one time. She said, "Why are you learning this piece?" And I was like, "Because it's cool." She's like, "Yeah, but why are you learning the piece?" Yes, it's cool, but what's the reason, right? So understanding that you learn a piece to rectify something within your playing, whether a technique or of some sort. So just being more serious about the repertoire that you choose, and not just because you're doing it, but because you're trying to obtain a certain skill set that is not as strong as it needs to be, given the repertoire that you choose to have, right? And then you fast forward to other people, throughout life. So those are some of the people, I mean, obviously I can go through all my teachers and whatnot, but those are the ones that kind of set a precedent, that prepared me to study with the teachers that I had at my conservatory, and then obviously at UCLA for my doctorate, and knowing how to interact with people and see them from one, who they are, and meet them where they are, so that you can provide something to the collective from a symbiotic point of view. So those are the teachers that really set the foundation that I interact with on a daily basis. And I also have my mentors, that I've took lessons with and whatnot. That we weren't every day, we weren't working together every day, but every so often when we get together, especially in Los Angeles, all right, cool, this is what we do and this is how we interact. So yeah, those are the people that kind of, whether they're directly or indirectly, taught you these life learning skills that you could apply later on.
Yeah, that's what I kind of picked up from what you're describing, is the character of these people, and then how they made you feel. And then you took that, and you what you said about rep as well, like just being intentional with it. Like I never heard it kind of put that way before, and it's like it has such a deeper meaning. And that's really cool. Like these lessons aren't just like, oh yeah, they're great players, but it's like they're great players and great human beings, and I can take this and and use it and project this out to everybody that I come in contact with. So that's really special. Sounds like you've had a lot of great influences growing up.
I did. I'm very grateful for that, because the caveat is, if we don't approach it from that level of empathy, then it just goes in one ear and not the other. You look at it passively, right?
Sure.
And because we are creating better human beings given the repertoire that we have, right? We are musicians that create music for people who come listen to us, who may be dealing with whatever they're dealing with. So for that one moment, Ixion's wheel stops turning, right? So then you've done what you needed to do as a healer. Sure. They didn't think about their job. They didn't think about their significant other or kids or whatever issue they may be dealing with, but more so of, wow, that was such a beautiful chord, or wow, that was a wonderful medley, or wow, I'm just very thankful to be in the presence of this, right? Because if you look at, that, then you become a better human being. But also, just to piggyback, looking at rep to build something, well, like, why were the Charlier etudes written? He wrote them for his students to obtain certain technical facility, right? So it's the same process, I believe. Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah, man.
So as a trumpet professor now at Florida Atlantic, what are some pedagogical like philosophies you emphasize as a teacher to your students, and as well as like the kind of culture you have built at FAU?
Right. For me, the first thing that I tell my students is that I give them two things. One, the tools that they need to succeed, and two, to find successful employment, whether it is performance, education, or even within the BA aspect, because music, BA, performance, education, and no commercial music. So I'll give you the tools. Now you have to use them so that you can find successful employment. And that's the first thing. Now, said tools would be one that I am a firm believer in, because I don't give a shit. I'm sorry. I don't care how fast. Sorry. Can you believe that out? Or keep it in. Keep it in. I don't care how fast or how high or how loud or soft you play, if your sound is trash, basura, means nothing. Nobody wants to play next to you. Nobody wants to hear that. So your sound will define you as a musician, but most importantly, a trumpet player, right? So we base everything off the basic fundamentals. Let's develop your sound. Well, you're probably like, well, I don't know what I sound like. I'm glad you asked that question, because also in my syllabus, I have a series of players from classical to commercial to jazz to contemporary classical, which is my area of expertise, to experimental, to all this other stuff. And then you find the people, but you got to do the research, right? You just can't do it by osmosis. Like, oh, I know what that person sounds like. Not yet. You got to put in that name. You got to see what repertoire they played. And you finally find, okay, I kind of like this sound. Okay, cool. Let's develop this, right? Let's see how to make this sound happen. Because most players are often imitated, but never duplicated, right? Because you have to find your own voice, because your sound will define you, right? And if it's a great sound, they can say, oh, we know exactly who that is in the hallway. Because I know exactly all of my students, current, past as well, and what they sound like, because I'm listening to them daily, right? Or they see me 3 times a week, right? Which I like about where I am at FAU. But that's what you got to deal with. So you got to deal with, one, understanding the tools that I give you, develop your sound so we can build a solid foundation. Upon foundation, we can build technique and facility and repertoire, right? This is how we base, because your undergrad, you're not going to learn it in a week. You're not going to learn it in a month, a semester, or a year. It's a 9 to 5 for 4 years. It's a 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, sometimes on the weekend, from 9 to 5 for 4 years. So that when you go out and you get that piece of paper, regardless of whatever the area of focus within the discipline of music is, you're ready to go. You're ready to find what? Successful employment, because you've applicated the tools that I've given you. Because everything is conceptual, right? You just can't pick up the horn and do it. You got to do the work. And then also, it's like working out, right? You got to tear the muscle to build the muscle. And with these basic fundamentals and principles, what it does for the embouchure and the chops is to break it down so you can build upon it, right? Patience is key. And as I'm getting older, I've not really been impatient, but I've relished more so now into the fact that I don't know shit. Right? And then I realized when I finally pick up my horn, I'm like, well, there you go. I've been doing this thing for years, but you sound great. Yeah, but now I sound good. I sound a little bit better. Now I'm more excited to do the same thing over again that I've been doing for the last 20 years. Because there's something special about it. So yeah, so that's where I begin with all of my students and my philosophy. And then ultimately is that I teach my students conceptually. One, as we perceive what we want here, right? We have to intellectually know what we want so that physically we can do the work, but ultimately emotionally we feel good about it, right? Because it's the power of 3, right? Physical, intellectual, emotional variable within itself is 1. 3 is a prime, divided by itself is 1, which is you, the center, right? And I approach that through everything in what we do 3 times and then ultimately once, because you only have 1 time to do your recital, or you have 1 time to do your performance. So we approach this in a way where you have a multiple of times, mainly 3, and there's a reason for that, so that you're able to do it just once. And now you have this pattern that you've built within a routine that allows you to execute something without missing, right? But then there's another principle that's more of a Buddhistic ideology. I don't really want to get into. We could, if we want to go there. But through my travels, it has allowed me to apply what I've learned outside of my backyard into my playing. And because of that, I feel, and then it just could be, snake oil, but I feel that I've been more connected to the spiritual side of what we do and what we make music, especially when we build a chord, and then move collectively, again, symbiotic, right? So that we understand that as a collective, we do something better. we do something great, the end goal. So that is what my whole philosophy is. And obviously there's more detail to it because we only have so much time on this, but with my students and my approach, so that we build that culture of empathy, right? We build that culture of seriousness, but being able to show up to a rehearsal prepared to make music and not rehearse the music, to practice it.
Right.
So that's my approach, man. It's simple, you know, and and obviously there are pedagogical things too, but we start there. Tools, find successful employment, sound, upon set sound, which is our foundation, technical, pedagogical, as well as a repertoire facility, so that you can become a better human being given your perspective medium, which is music.
Nice.
Beautifully put.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now focusing back onto you, I mean, you obviously mentioned before having these skill sets of being an orchestral musician, a contemporary classical musician. You also developed and played jazz. So can you talk about the importance that you've experienced from, I don't even want to say like just jazz, but like all types of music, right? Like the importance of listening and learning all types of music, and what has that informed you, and how has that shaped and developed you? Because I feel like, especially in schools, we create these lanes of like, you're this or you're this. And it's like, I have a young son, and it's like, I want to expose him to all sorts of music, not just this, and I feel like, yeah, by doing that, it can limit you. I feel like personally, in my opinion, it's very limiting. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that and how that has shaped you as a musician.
Listen, man, you hit it on the head, man. Again, preparation crossing paths is opportunity. I was very fortunate to have my applied teachers who had this same approach, right? Because you're never going to teach a student the same way. And if you do, you might not want to be a teacher, because you never evolve, right? And with evolution comes, being applicable to what's happening. As we advance as a society, as music changes depending on the decade, so does the generation, right? There was a time where you could graduate high school and go into the symphony orchestra, right? There was a time where you could move to a city where the level of music at that time was this, where if we were to look at it where we are now, it might not have been there, right? So there have been exceptional players, and so you have to be able to be flexible, right? And again, it starts at the very beginning. You got to know your pedagogy. You got to know your scales. I don't care if you're classical or jazz. You're a musician first, who happens to play the trumpet, okay? Or your chosen instrument is the trumpet. So you got to know the pedagogical approach to the instrument. And my teachers were that. They taught scales. They taught to be, with slurring and flexibility. They taught technical facility, right? Going through the Clarke, going through the Arbans, going through the Schlossberg, understanding the IE voicings, right? Understanding what the repertoire is, right? When you play in a collegiate ensemble, right? If it's not a conservatory, even if it is, right? If it's a collegiate ensemble and you have a music education degree and a performance degree, you will also have choir, band, jazz band, and maybe an experimental ensemble of some sort, right? Especially if you're a music ed student. If you're a music ed student, and I mean this, if you're a music ed student and you go through 4 years without playing, like high school music ed, without playing in a jazz band, I hope you never find a job. I hope you never find a job. And I mean that with every fiber of my being. Because when you go into a high school, you're not just going to teach band. You got a jazz band. And then depending on what happened, you might have to be the orchestra director. You might have to teach choir, right? So the encompassing 4-year, 5-year, I think a music ed degree should be 5 years. Degree, you should be able to be in a one ensemble, a jazz orchestra, a choir, if not the main choir, a university choir, and sit in the orchestra, right? So if you're saying, well, I play strings, but I can't be in one ensemble, but you can also be in choir. You can talk to the jazz band director and see, do you guys need strings for anything? Or you can get with a chamber ensemble and put a rhythm section behind that. You got to get your ear outside of this one box and look outside the proverbial box. Because when you do that, you realize that the world is a little bit bigger than your one focus. I have friends of mine or associates, who went to school for one thing, and they are not doing that. They're doing everything else but that because they chose not to be exposed to other things, right? So instead of playing their instrument, making money, and keeping the lights on, they are playing their instrument, but they're doing like all other things that have nothing to do with music to find supplemental income, right? And I think that's a detrimental, especially now, nowadays, when you need to be able to be a musician. You play trumpet. I'm going to only speak for trumpet because we're all trumpet players here. You're not just going to play in the orchestra hall. Sometimes trumpets need to be in a pit. Sometimes trumpets need to be in the back of a concert, not a concert, but a back of a club hall. Sometimes trumpets need to be in the church area. So that's a mixture of things. Not everything is going to be on 1 and 3. There is also
2 and 4.
Right? But if your sound is basura, it doesn't matter what you do, you ain't getting the gig. So my teachers made us work on the basic fundamentals of being a musician who happens to play the trumpet. Then, depending on if we've proven ourselves via it's a barrier jury or your scale exams or your such and such exams, like, okay, what would you like your focus to be on? I want to go this way. Okay, cool. I want to go this way. Okay, cool. Or I want to do a little bit of this. Okay, cool. Because in my studio, I don't care if you're commercial music major, performance major, ed major, or BA. You have your barrier. I need all scales as well as your certain repertoire to be learned first before we go in any direction. If you don't have this, I'm sorry, this is not what you want to do. Well, what am I going to do? You wasted 2 years because you chose not to do this. And I told you exactly what you needed to do, but you didn't do it. So what am I going to do? No, my name is Paul, and that's between y'all. I don't know. Because we don't need any more mediocre musicians, because mediocrity meets complacency. And now, especially post-COVID, right? Especially post-COVID, things are changing. Things have changed. We know friends of ours in certain orchestras that were, furloughed or, that were disbanded, right? We have musician friends of ours, it's not just playing wise, but like even during COVID, not knowing how to lay over tracks, not knowing how to record themselves or, do that because they didn't realize that I need to do this. Yes, music education, not music this. Education, a 4-year degree, 5-year degree in education is to be versatile. Knowing what finale is, knowing what Sibelius is, even though I don't like Sibelius, I think it's trash. That's just me. Anyway, knowing how to utilize Logic and Pro Tools. Not saying you got to be the next, engineer of the world, but just, hey, I want to record myself for an audition, or I want to stack these to do it as a duet or a trio or whatever, or I want to utilize video with audio and put something together. Again, thinking outside the proverbial box. You got to be versatile. So for me, and because I'm just OCD, I just feel that, you got to be able to do a mix. You understand, you don't have to do everything, but you got to know how to fill a beat on 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, right? And then even when you look at the early 20th century, what was happening in the early 20s in the continental United States, New York and Washington? The Harlem Renaissance, right? Like this is stuff that was going on. You have scouts sitting, European classical composers sending scouts to America to see what's America's classical music, right? Stravinsky, Dvorak, New World Symphony, right? You look at the Ravel's Piano Concerto, that second movement, that's nothing but Gil Evans. Come on now. You look at the Rite of Spring, Stravinsky's. These are dance moves. That's a freaking tango. Right? Versus like that's so rigid, right? Allow to express yourself through the music. When you understand that, you're not sitting here. There's a groove here, an underlining pulse. And then when you don't limit yourself to that, the universe will open its doors to you. Like, holy shiitake. I just felt this rhythm. It's a Dada 816. It's a jota.
Mm.
Dum, dum, king, dum. Mm, 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 mm. Bow, bow, da, chika. There's a groove there. Then when you realize that, you might smile a little bit. You might realize, oh, that made me feel what? Good. So when you look at it, you're not necessarily, afraid to do it, but then you're looking to experiment on this. So if someone says, hey, do you mind playing such and such and such and such? Yeah, I can play that. Cool. What about this? Sure, I can play that. Cool. What about this? Yeah, I can do that too. Great. Now you're set for the week, for the month, for the year. Oh, what are you doing? I've been playing my horn since X, Y, and Z. What about such a, yeah, I got this gig, but I got to fly from here, then do this. Like, yeah, but I wish I could play more. Well, you can do this music. Yeah, I don't know how to do that. I think a lot of teachers set their students up for failure and stick in one conceptual ideology. Mm-hmm. It's no longer the 50s or 60s or 70s or 80s. We have to evolve and modernize so that this next generation can continue what we do, because it's going to change 10 years from now anyway.
Right.
Then another 10 years from now, look at the horns in the industry. Mm-hmm. Not everything is a small bore horn. Everything is a little bit larger now, right? So we have to be able to do that. And so for me, it's also, rewarding to just do something a little bit different as a soloist. I get to do a mixture of that, right? As contemporary classical, which has that contemporary sound. And one of my biggest mentors was Wynton Marsalis, is still Wynton Marsalis, right? Even though I only took a couple lessons with him, I knew who this man was. One, I can identify with, because I look at him and he looks like somebody within my family, but also two, doing both classical and jazz at the highest level, mm-hmm. right? So again, you have to have your choice of like what you want. If you want to do this, make sure, if you want to do one thing, make sure you're doing like festivals, make sure you're doing auditions, make sure that you're playing in your local community orchestra or band or whatever, going out, giving recitals, networking yourself to get your name out there so you have the opportunity to keep playing and playing and playing versus what you do once a week or twice a week at a university campus in an mm-hmm. ensemble room. That's not real world experience.
Right.
I'm sorry. If somebody said that, that's a lie.
No, right? I completely agree with you. For me, obviously I think COVID over the past, 2-3 years have kind of expedited a lot of things in our industry. It's caused us to have to streamline things because I think people realize, oh, perhaps this doesn't have as much value, or maybe certain budgets got cut. Now there's less opportunities for more musicians to be out here and working. So like, I definitely agree with the idea of like students, and I talk about this a lot, and, even within our department, music department, I'm always thinking, all right, how can we set our students up for what the world is now, not what it was 20, 40, 50 years ago, right? And, because, the preface of this question is like, we are pushing students in one direction or this direction, and they're not getting a full service of a music educational experience. So like, for me, like one thing I always talk to my students is like, okay, what do you want to do? Okay, great. But you also need to develop these other skills, because you're going to have to use these skills, especially like the music educator, the music education majors, right? And definitely the performance majors. Like, to me, a performance major shouldn't be just playing orchestral excerpts for 4+ years. It should be, you're playing excerpts, you're playing in the jazz ensemble, you're taking some business classes, you're learning how to be an entrepreneur. Like it needs to really kind of expand out of the traditional Western canon, right, that we've come accustomed to through the old like conservatory system, right? So I completely agree, and it definitely needs to change, because we have to work, and as you say, it's only going to evolve more and more over the next decades to come. So what does that look like? And I think sometimes we have to we don't know what will happen in the future, but we know it's not going to be what it was. So I certainly agree with you on that. Another thing I noticed with you, I guess this kind of plays in the idea of like being versatile, is you're also like very active on social media, I follow you on Instagram and Facebook, so I I love watching your videos, and they're hilarious to me. Um, but what are some of like the benefits and or drawbacks you think for musicians who use social media to put their materials out there, and I'll let you just kind of take it from there.
Sure. Well, I mean, I really wasn't, I don't know about y'all, but even before COVID, I was not really on social media because I'm out in the streets doing my thing, right? I ain't got time to look at other people, right? But I think what happened when everything stopped and we couldn't go out, our only lifeline, if you weren't living with someone, um, uh, was the interwebs, right?
Mm.
Your phone was your iPad, and people making these dumbass TikTok videos, right? And I hate TikTok. I don't like to use the word hate. I just hate TikTok, right? Because like, oh, look at me, I'm dancing. Because now we're looking for validation.
Right.
I'm doing through likes. So the more likes I have, that means I'm more validated, right? Which also is a disturbing social construct, right? But that's the only thing we had for almost a year and a half, right? So, but then we kind of stuck with that, right? So I think it's a bad thing when it's bad quality, right? But I think it's a good thing if it's something good. So I'll just give my thing for example. So on my Instagram, if I'm discussing something that is near and dear to me, or if someone sends me a message, because a lot of the things that I post, I get messages from. Some I don't even read because I'm like, I'm not going to talk about that. And other ones are genuine questions like, what do you mean? Like this one that I recently did. What do you mean, like finding the resultant tone? Like, how do you lock in, right? And I'm like, well, we can use this with our basic pedagogy. And so the same thing that I teach my students, I showcase this via my videos, right? Of like how I'm locking in and realizing that with a drone, how to hear the open fifth and the tritone and the sixth and the major and third and what you're hearing, because that resultant tone, depending on the interval, is an octave or a second inversion, four chord, and the tonic is, or the a seventh, like a 7/8 suspension, depending on how you hear it, right? And I give these examples because it gives them like, hey, even though we're not here in the same room, we can see what's happening, right? Other things I like to do with these social things, if I have a performance coming up and there is something very beautiful about playing, like when someone says, okay, what do you mean by like this double tonguing octave things, like what are you talking about, like how do you do that, like what do you mean by that? So I will play an excerpt, and explain that via that person, via direct message, but I will post the excerpt. Then two, it kind of gives you, an ability to say, hey, this is what I'm doing in my classes, or this is what I'm doing in my own studio. And at the same time, if I'm out performing, I also like to, to showcase the people that I'm performing with. When we were at Carnegie, you and I, there's our pictures of us, like, here's these two professors that are out doing their thing and we're working together, right? Or, it could be something completely different, but here is this professor and this professor working together. Or I might not even be tagged in it, but there's like, hey, I saw a video that someone posted of you. It was like, what are you talking about? Oh yeah, I was doing the Bach Contrapuntus 9 with X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Because it shows you, one, that you're not just inside the room, right? You're being out and you're being active, because we are also showcasing not just the social media, but to answer your question previously about how to find, again, like I said to my students, successful employment, right? By
Hmm.
networking and seeing that you're not just in the classroom, but you're outside of the classroom doing the same thing. And your job is basically this, because I haven't worked since I was 14, right? I feel very fortunate. I have so much gratitude to the fact, that I can sit here on a Saturday in my office talking about trumpet and I'm getting paid for it, right? Because it's the same thing that I do Monday morning, then Tuesday, and then Wednesday and Thursday and Friday talking about trumpet, right? Because you've built a career path for yourself, right? you know, and utilizing what I learned in, you know, as a business marketing major, marketing management major, is learning how to manage yourself as an artist, you know, knowing how to create that networking opportunities, right? So social media is the new thing now, right? We can either be saturated with a lot of trash or some actual golden nuggets, right, of information, and then utilize that and collaborate, because now you collaborating with not only the person across the state from you, you could also be collaborating with somebody across the continent, right? Across a small pond, you know, and then networking in that aspect, so that now, since we're all traveling, you know, X, Y, and Z, you know, oh, I saw this social media post that you did, and I would love for you to come and work with my band this way. You know, versus where it used to be, where that person would come to your school, or you would come to their festival, or vice versa, and they would see you, and then you would then create that. But now they'd be like, hey, would you mind, you know, maybe would you be interested in maybe doing this with a symphony or X, Y, and Z? Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Because are you that serious in person? Even more so, you know, because now people can get, you know, inspired to do this. So I think social media, to answer your question, is a good thing, but also be conscientious of the quality of content that you are trying to get out. Because what's more important to you, the quantity of how many videos, or the quality of what you're displaying in said video, right?
Right.
So yeah, so I think it's a good thing or a bad thing, depending on your intent.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. That's great. Yeah, you know, I would say I've been a little more active on social media the past maybe year or two. Because one of the things I did, I think you saw this, I was preparing a concerto. So it's like, what if I post like the progress from like day one all the way up to the performance? And because I thought, you know, for someone who either a student or someone who's never gone through that process, I thought it would be a good way to kind of see what that journey is like, both for me, because it's like, all right, I got to really like prepare, I got to take time, I got to do this, and I got to be, you know, am I practicing what I preach, sort of thing. So for me, that I thought it would be good, and I thought it would also be good for other people to kind of see that journey along the way, because we are human. Because I think sometimes, you know, even with social media, we see someone playing something, and it's like, wow, this person's an incredible musician. I will never be able to do that same thing, but they don't really see, you know, behind the scenes, like the process to get to that result. So I thought it was a way to kind of unveil, you know, what's actually is going on, the process to get to that finished result. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good thing too, right? Because it exposes yourself, like effective practicing that becomes, you know, efficient versus effective practicing. Because you can be effective, but the product is not as efficient, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you understand the efficiency of it, which makes it then effective, the end product, right? And if that is a pedagogical approach that you would want to discuss, sure, you know,
Right.
and I think that's a good thing, right? And then also, you know, sometimes you just have to, you know, if something's captured, I don't think everything needs to be captured. I don't think so. I'm not saying that it needs to be, right? But sometimes, let's just say that you're with the right people at the right instance on tour, everything's working, and you can talk about, man, this happened X, Y, and Z, and like, oh man, you had to be there. It's like, oh, we got video of it. I'm like, what? Give me that. You mean you have a bit of video of me busting out a triple C after playing a 2-hour show? Hell yeah, I'm gonna post this. Because not only do you get that, but what you also see is the synergy on stage. Right? Like that, like the excitement. Because the reason why I am sitting in this chair, because I bought this chair, but two, because I was excited to hear the stories of my mentors, right? Brad, you know, and my master Carl from, you know, Shenandoah, and then Moffitt from, you know, Dr. Williams, excuse me, but I can call him Moffitt. He said I can. I still feel weird Moffitt though. But from Columbus State, and then obviously Yens, right?
Right.
But it's like when they talk about the stories of like when they're traveling And, you know, they say, this is why you don't put on, you know, lotion before you go under the lights, right? Or this is why you don't eat a certain thing before you play because X, Y, and Z, right? And I'm like, I want to experience that. I want to experience that vibe and that energy. And I get to do that because when they do that and they bring it back to the studio for us, I'm on fire. I'm on fire. I loved watching, and I'm sure you guys did this, you know, but watching your teachers in live performance, right? And it's like, that's my teacher. That's my teacher. I need to figure out how to do that. And you feel so proud, right? And not all the time your students can go to your performances, right? You know, like I play here in Symphony of Americas, and the students know they get, you know, this like backstage access, right? Like, Doc, I can just come in, like, shut up. Just don't say nothing. Come to the back of the stage. I'm right here. Walk in. But Doc, shut up. Come to the stage. They see me like, you know, sitting here doing my thing with the symphony. Like we did Appalachian Spring, you know, we've played this, you know, piece, and there's only 2 trumpet parts, but there's this like this part on the 3rd page between first trumpet, second, and then the bones. And you're like, you're right here, and your students are like, damn, that was intense. I know it was intense. That's how intense you got to be. So when I tell you to do this in rehearsal or in your lesson, you need to have that intensity. Yeah, when's the next rehearsal? Or when's the next concert? Next month. Cool, we're there. So that's a beautiful thing, right? So I think that if we're able to showcase that for our students, then they can be inspired to do this, right? Have that energy. And if they can't be there physically, we can showcase a little bit of that social media aspect of those small snippets of here's the side, like the back, the VIP access. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for that. Yeah, so, you know, I know you're a busy man, so we got to let you go. But before we let you go, we kind of like to end episode or asking our guests, what are they listening to? What's the new thing? What's on your playlist right now? It can be classical, jazz, commercial, country, whatever it is. I'm just curious. What's the last thing you listened to?
The last thing I listened to was Kimbaribara, Celia Cruz. For those of you who don't know who Celia Cruz is, shame on you. Those of you who do know who Celia Cruz is, de Baja de Corazon. You know, she is the queen of salsa. And so beautiful thing about, I mean, obviously I'm in Florida, you know, and you get to roll the window down and have a nice cigar when you're driving on A1A and coming to these auditions. And on the radio, Kimbaribara came on, and that was the thing that was on my radio last, and it's not my radio, but my, you know, my iTunes in my car. So I have my Latin mix. So that's what I'm really into right now. Well, not into, I've always been into that. But Kimbaribara, you know, Hector Lavoe, Willie Colon, you know, all those staples in salsa music, because I'm listening to one thing so much, you know, it helps me cleanse the palate so that when I get back to it, if I'm playing it, then it's like, okay, now we're good. So now I can just sit back and enjoy.
Yeah, I like the idea.
So reverse question, what are you guys listening to?
Tyler, you want to go first? I can go first, whichever.
A lot of Sesame Street. Yeah, because of my son. We'll just tell Alexa to play it. But there's actually, I didn't know that Jazz at Lincoln Center did like a collaboration with Sesame Street. It's pretty killer. Like it's got some good stuff. So we'll put that on. Listen to that. But yeah, I mean, besides that too, I've been, you know, I mean, to be honest, like recently I've been just kind of diving into some podcasts. Rich Roll did a podcast with Michael Wardian, who's an ultra runner up and actually in like the Arlington, DC area. So I was listening to that this past week, which is really good. But yeah, other than that, you know, it's like, to be honest, it's a lot of that stuff right now, which is kind of cool because it's simple melodies that you learn, but you hear it in a different way. And it's so cool to see my son, who will hear the same song lyric wise, right? But different people, and he still recognizes it. So even at 18 months, you see melody, how that attracts people. And so, yeah, I'm learning a lot just having a young one around and seeing how music influences people. And then taking that and just the things that we talked about today, right? Just being creative, being innovative. It's like you got to break that shell. And just like when your children, like again, seeing my son, he's just all over the place doing so many things without judgment, right? I mean, he's just exploring, trying to see what's new, what's happening, what works, what doesn't work. But there's not this judgment piece of like, no, that wasn't right. It's just like this liberty of like, go and try and see and touch these things and hear these things. You know, we're outside because it was a nice sunny day and it's like the wind hits you and it's like, what does that feel like? You know? So yeah, that's kind of where I am right now.
Nice.
Wow. Man, my answer is going to be like lame. Well, I recently, I finally got around to it, listening to the new Snarky Puppy album, Empire Central. And, you know, I've always been a big fan. I'm sure, I know you two are probably big fans of their work and what they do. So I finally got around to listening to, at least to the full album. For me, like when I listen to an album, I have to listen to it completely through uninterrupted so I can like really digest it.
Really?
Yeah, I don't like to do like one and then maybe come back to two. Like especially if it's someone like I'm a big fan of, I was like, I got to hear the whole album the way it was intended and just go straight through. You know, so if I'm on a long drive somewhere or if I'm just at home and I don't have the TV on, I'm sorry, let me just listen to this album. I can be doing, you know, writing emails or something like that. But like that's how I like to digest new music. So I got to hear the whole thing uninterrupted. And I like to do 2 full listenings through before I make like a true judgment. It may not be back to back, but maybe like one day, maybe a week later. And then I was like, all right, I like that album, or no, you know. So that's what I've listened to this week. No grand philosophy to that. Just that's what I've been doing. Yeah, it's been kind of my peace of mind, at least this week, you know, at the end of a work week. So but before we go, Dr. Jones, I want to thank you so much for taking the time, for allowing us to talk to you today and see your coffee making experience. Again, this is a first for us, you know, but I knew you wouldn't have it any other way. And shout out to the pinky ring that you have. I know you're all about the pinky ring.
Listen, get in it.
So we want to thank you and we really appreciate your time. And for all the listeners out there, thank you for listening to this podcast. We hope that you subscribe and share with a friend, and please give us our 5-star rating on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. So we hope to see you guys next time, and thank you all again.